All right, welcome into another video here. We're working today on the Befaco joystick. Uh, this is a kit you can order from their site. First off, I just kind of went through, made sure everything was there, kind of just did a rough inventory. It's a good practice to do that just to make sure that everything got in the kit, if there's any mistakes. And it also gives you a good chance to kind of get an overview of what's up ahead, what you're going to be working with. They do provide printed instructions, which are super helpful, but there's also online instructions as well. I started off with the resistors first. Basically sorted them out, got them in, went from the most common resistors down to the least common values. So a bit of a trigger warning for some of you out there. The way I decided to solder these resistors is from the top down. Basically putting all the resistors in, and then instead of flipping the board over and soldering from where the pins stick out, basically just applying the iron on the top, adding a little bit of solder in and heating it up and allowing the solder to flow down into the hole. Now, honestly, with a board this dense, it's a really good way to go, in my opinion. I really kind of liked it. One of the nice things is when you actually go to trim all the leads, they can all be basically straight. You don't have to tilt any out to kind of create a little bit of a hold into the board or anything like that. They can all just be snipped, and you can get really close, get a very flush, low profile group of solder joints. Now, one thing that I thought about in hindsight after doing the build, and especially after watching the video and everything like that if I had to do it again, I would populate all the resistors, all the diodes, all the axial components first, all at once, and then solder them in one swoop. Instead of doing it in the way that I did, where I did piecemeal of just, these values and then these values and so on, it actually made it a little bit more difficult because there are several moments where solder slid into the wrong hole and I had to spend time wicking it out, which was not fun and could have been avoided if I simply populated the whole thing right from the get-go. One thing I did want to mention was the excellent quality of the build manual. We kind of went over it really quickly earlier. But one thing to note about the build manual is just how well it's put out. All the resistors, all the information is written out there for you, so you can easily go through and verify which components you have. A little side note too, I always recommend, although I didn't do it too many times here until I was towards the end, of confirming those resistors. Just throwing them on your meter for just a second just to make sure it is 100K and not a 10K or 100 ohms or anything like that, where you might have mistakenly seen it, or maybe there was some sort of problem with the printing process. Who knows? I've had it happen enough to where I kind of worry from time to time. With a kit like this, there really isn't a reason to worry. Those typically have already been taken care of by the kit manufacturer. One other thing to note, when you are cutting these leads to save a pair, you will need them for the ferrite beads that will come later on. They're axial ferrites, but they do not already have a lead built in. Just simply use one of these left over. They're not too big, so it should be fairly easy, but it will be a bit of a tight one. At least that was my experience. It was a bit tight, but still very doable. Just something to think of when you're cutting these leads off and throwing them in the trash. So we're putting in the diodes here. Again, I also put the ferrite bead in at this time, so just keep in mind when you're doing that, you'll need some leads for it, but really not that big of a deal. The diodes really weren't too difficult. There's not a whole bunch, so it's pretty straightforward. But of course, you always want to be mindful that you do orientate them correctly because they are polarized, and that you don't mistake the 4148s for the larger, bigger ones, the 1N4001s, I think is what those are. Alright, now we're going to put on the IC sockets. Those are pretty straightforward. I go through and check, make sure that they're all sticking out and everything goes in nice and smooth, obviously. But my typical approach, and your mileage may vary, is just to hold one in and by the corner, and then kind of on the opposite corner of that, tack one of those in very lightly. Doesn't have to be perfect, I just need it so that it doesn't fall out. Then I can place it face down and just begin going through and soldering each one of the pins. All the IC packages on here are 8 pins. There's one spot here where I couldn't tell that the 2 leads connected until I wicked it away and saw that it actually did. With those done, go ahead and just put in the ICs as the next section of the instructions. I like to normally wait, but I figured, oh well, let's give it a try. What bad could happen? And truth be told, nothing bad did. Once we've got those in, we're going to go ahead and do all the capacitors. Starting with the 100 nanofarad capacitors, these are all the bypass caps for the various ICs. Almost each one is going to get 2. I do remember there is a section where they share, or some of them might share, but either way, you're just going to put in all these different ones. They're the yellows. Well, my kit had yellow ones. I think it was at one point I found I had spare resistors that had hidden away. Found their location and popped them in. Went ahead and put the electrolytic caps in and anything else remaining, and then just flipped it over and soldered them all in. Again, the board is really tight, so take your time. Rotate it if you need to get in a better position for your iron. Although I will say, doing half the board from top down, or effectively half of it, was a really big help in getting these all soldered on. Once we're done here, we'll go ahead and connect our power supply. This is the 10-pin input. And now we're going to go ahead and put on the front panel components. Now there's several jacks and 4 pots and 2 switches. The important thing, and it does mention this in the manual, is to place them in there so that they are in there and do not solder them in yet. They're going to be a little bit loose. The reason you do this will become apparent when you start to put the panel on, because they're not going to line up perfectly, and having as much free movement and wiggling them in is going to be really important. Once you get the panel on and you're happy, then secure everything, all the nuts. You can do all of them. I don't always. It just kind of depends. Whatever you think is going to be the most secure, but getting them in place is important in relationship to the panel. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put all the nuts on. There's different colored ones. I just look using the Befaco website to kind of go off of which ones to use. The potentiometer nuts seem to be a little bit different size. I think they were a little smaller than the jacks, but I can't say for certain. I do remember there was a slight size difference. And now we'll just go ahead and solder those on. One little side note here. The LEDs for the unit, the ones that represented the LEDs for the gates were fine. But I did notice after the build that I should have reversed the bicolored LEDs that represented the X and Y polarity. Just because, in my experience, and as far as I can tell, when I go positive, it would turn red, and when I went negative, it would turn green. For me, I like to have that reversed. The Befaco standard may be a little bit different. Who knows? Maybe I messed something up. I looked at the video and I lined it up correctly, but I may go back on that joystick someday and just pop those LEDs out and flip them around. Just something to be aware of. It is a little bit difficult to tell because they are bicolored and you're not exactly sure which one is the dominant color on there. And the kit that I got, if you reverse it, it should be green positive, red negative. Also, if you're uncertain, you can always just put everything together but the LEDs and then place them in, push them against the side to get enough tension so that they connect, and you can see if it works for you in that particular fashion. And of course you can always just take them out if you're not happy with how they're soldered in. The last part is going to be soldering in the joystick connection. This was pretty straightforward. I did look at the manual just to verify the orientation of the wires and everything, and I matched it up the same as what it had in the manual, and everything seemed to test out afterwards. Getting the ring on and getting it secure was a little bit tricky. The screws are going to bite into some plastic. There's not a threading or anything like that. So initially I thought I was going into the wrong part. And you will have to put a little bit of muscle behind it just to get that to turn, just a heads up. But after I got it secure, honestly, it really secured the whole thing. It felt really sturdy, a really strong piece. So I wasn't concerned that I'd done anything wrong after that. And here we go. Just going to give it a quick test and make sure it's working. Checking the knobs. They all light up. X and Y work. And quite honestly, it turned out to be a really nice little module. I was very happy with it. I've used it a little bit so far and really like how sensitive it is, how much range I can get and movement. And I look forward to using it more in the future. If you like this video, definitely like and comment below. Let me know what Befaco modules you've built in the past, what you think about them, what you've thought about some of the DIY kits, maybe some other DIY kits you like out there that we can do in the future. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.